Over here, stranger.
Resident Evil Retrospective.
Con alegría, con alegría.
In 2001, Capcom announced Resident Evil 4. It was to be part of an exclusivity deal with Nintendo dubbed the Capcom 5 that would bring the entire RE series to the GameCube, along with Piano 3, Killer 7, Dead Phoenix, and Beautiful Joe. A remake of the original Resident Evil, 0, and the sequel to Code Veronica were initially planned. RE4 went through 3 separate identities before the 4th and final was developed to completion. The only thing Capcom was absolutely sure of from page 1 was that the central character would be ex-Raccoon PD officer Leon Kennedy. The skinny redhead became a hulky heartthrob, and the setting moved to Europe. At Tokyo Game Show in 2002, background designer Hiroshi Shibata premiered the very first gameplay of Resident Evil 4. Capcom hinted at Kennedy becoming infected or possessed by the earliest form of the T-virus, and flashed locations like a windy mansion and a lightning-swarmed airship. And a mysterious enemy followed Leon around with a large pair of scissors. It was absolutely stunning at the time, though it looked to follow a similar path as the prior games. No other areas were ever shown, because the version was scrapped shortly thereafter. The second effort was shown at E3 in 2003. The footage was light on story, but thick with paranormal horror. Stalking shadows and masochistic dolls taunted Leon, with the centerpiece a seemingly unshootable phantasm swinging a chain and hook. These levels would eventually be thrown out of the final product, but it was impossible to ignore the fully 3D engine, over-the-shoulder perspective, and free-look, laser-guided gunplay. These spiritual entities dissipated as series navigator Shinji Mikami decided to strike out in a completely different direction. Coming off directing Piano 3 and producing Beautiful Joe, he didn't want to do Romero Zombies for the 6th time, but he also wanted to make the next numbered entry as evil as the rest. Eventually, his final vision was shown, complete with enemies that were faster and meaner. In the media blitz, the red-hot question was, who were these ferocious peasants that were attacking Leon? And where in the world was he? Resident Evil 4 first reached the GameCube in America on January 11, 2005. The series picked up with Leon's life 6 years after Raccoon City and Rockford Island. Kennedy was then working for an arm of the US Secret Service when the president's daughter, Ashley Graham, was kidnapped by a group of religious militants called Los Illuminados. Leon was sent on a one-man rescue mission to bring her back, taking him into the heart of rural Spain. For the first time, the plot was out of Umbrella's jurisdiction. The company had been all but dissolved.
Leon, I hope you can hear me.
Loud and clear. There was a hostile local.
Take whatever measures necessary to save the subject.
Leon's mission was broken into 5 chapters, each containing 3 or 4 separate sections. The ink ribbon concept had dried up, leaving Leon free to tap his progress out as long as he could find a typewriter. More alarming than this update was the wide-open perspective. After 7 years of static fixed angles, your eyes now saw what Leon saw. His target zone followed a steady red beam that placed each precious bullet on its mark. To adjust alongside these agile controls, Capcom created a new enemy, and they were armed. Leon's first signs of opposition came from a community of villagers called Los Ganados, Spanish for cattle but also meaning herd or mob. They were perplexing in that they exuded aggressive behavior like the undead, who were communicative and could attack in packs. As Leon met more of the homicidal cult, their tactics got deadlier. The Ganados could climb ladders, throw weapons, shoot guns, dodge incoming fire, or block it completely with masks and shields. They also set traps, as the path to Ashley was sprinkled with explosives, bear traps, and the occasional rolling boulder. The real tragedy was that this endless aggression was not their own. The village had been seduced by a robed zealot named Osmond Sadler. He injected its people with a prehistoric organism called Las Plagas that absorbed their thoughts and controlled their actions. This blurred the line between villain and victim, as they weren't responsible for their violent acts, but Leon had no choice but to clear him from his path. Their symbiotic infection also found its way into Leon and his main objective, Ashley. While unconscious, both Americans were impregnated with the volatile organism, and the pair of test subjects only had so much time to remove it. Researcher and undercover informant Luis Serra tracked Leon down on several occasions, sacrificing everything to stall the growth and eventually clear them of Sadler's offspring. Finding the president's daughter was the easy part. With several methods of escape cut off, Leon had to take Ashley even deeper into the Illuminados' lair. She would be snatched up and rescued a few more times before the coast was clear, and her safety was Leon's top priority. The precocious hostage could be told to follow or stay put, became playable for a pair of chapters, and had her own separate health bar. Ashley and Leon's green meter grew once they acquired new yellow herbs, and only after they decided which of the two would get the added slice of life.
Got a selection of good things on sale, stranger.
How much the pair could hold was also subject to serious change. Every prior Resident Evil gave each survivor 4 to 8 slots to carefully house the bare essentials. RE4 substituted them with a grid of virtual space, where the items could be placed in any order as long as they all fit. This attaché case had 4 upgradable sizes, with even the earliest model housing more than the older heroes could carry. Any unwanted items could be pawned off to a mysterious traveling merchant for cold, hard cash.
Got something that might interest you.
If the previous item boxes stretched the suspension of disbelief, RE4's shadowy salesman pulled it till it snapped. The seemingly omnipresent item broker could pay for discarded junk or upgrade existing armaments, and his collection blossomed as the mission moved forward. Where he got all these pesetas, or how he managed to always stay one room ahead of Leon, were issues of little concern. Treasure pieces glistened along the campaign's path, with smaller gems fitting into larger antiques to create pricing combinations. These and key items were found in their own inventory menu, and did not take up attaché space. Pistols, shotguns, and sniper rifles all had a handful of models and customizable parts. Grenades came in 3 varieties: standard explosive, incendiary fire, and light flash, and mine throwers chucked carefully placed charges. The rogue vendor also offered special guns when a series of medallions had been found and disposed of, and manned several shooting galleries awarding advanced trinkets and prizes. These could be tested on the new wave of monsters, including cloaked insects, regenerating parasite hosts, an evolved alligator, superior liquor, and a savage brute called El Gigante. If this mobile trading post zapped players out of the experience, the game's unexpected QuickTime events were engineered to pull them back in. If anything, they forced viewers to pay close attention. Whenever Leon was placed in sudden danger, one of 2 button combos would appear moments before they needed to be pressed. This mechanic, further popularized by the PS2's God of War, which came out 2 months later, allowed survivors to participate in elaborately choreographed sequences. They used to sit and watch.
If you become unpleasant to our eyes, you'll face severe consequences.
Enough talk. Die, comrade!
These press-or-die events were layered sporadically into RE4's narrative, proving Leon was as responsive as he was lucky. Confronting one of the Illuminados' elite almost guaranteed a button prompt. The cult's council of mutants included the village chief and segmented psychopath Batores Mendez, the vertically challenged owner of the lavish estate Ramon Salazar, and an ex-US operative and old colleague of Leon's named Jack Krauser. All three antagonists had a thrilling boss fight, and each ended up the same way. But Leon's true nemesis was his long-lost partner, Ada Wong. With no explanation of how she escaped Raccoon City, the selfish spy gave Leon tips and defection until he delivered what she wanted. Upon defeating Sadler and rescuing Ashley, Ada snatched up the only sample of Las Plagas, and after setting the inevitable self-destruct sequence, made a timely escape. Leon was forced to vacate Ashley on a jet ski, and the two met the open sea right as Sadler's military complex vanished beneath the waves. Despite the initial promise of console exclusivity, Resident Evil 4 was eventually ported to the PlayStation 2, PC, and Nintendo Wii. All three contained nearly identical features, with the Wii standing out thanks to its motion controls and widescreen display. The GameCube tailored Leon and Ashley in alternate costumes after the game had been finished, and the other systems received a second set of parody threads. Mercenaries returned as another trial of speed and damage, with 5 playable characters. The other original minigame, Assignment Ada, gestated into a 5-chapter saga called Separate Ways, both revealing what the Super Sneak was up to during Leon's adventure. Saving a fortune or beating the clock also unlocked unlimited additions to the arsenal. And when you finished the campaign, you could take your attaché case full of first aid spray and upgraded weapons right into another. Resident Evil 4 received over 20 Game of the Year awards from a multitude of publications, sold over 6 million copies, and has since appeared in a prominent position on several top countdowns. It's been called the best title in the series, and even of all time. It's also been accused of turning Biohazard into something it's not. There were significantly fewer puzzles, most being optional, and a higher stock of ammunition. Hardcore action replaced most of the white-knuckle suspense, and deranged commoners filled in for drooling zombies. Some felt lost now that the series had changed, but that's exactly what Capcom wanted. Resident Evil had graduated to a new generation. It had taken the survival horror genre to the forefront. Any fan following a popular franchise knows that inevitably means mass media. By the time Leon headed to Spain, Resident Evil had already received 2 motion picture adaptations. The third arrived in 2007, leaving Umbrella heads with a trilogy of confusing proportions. The events the films portrayed were originally not supposed to be perceived as canon, but steps taken by Capcom following their release have linked the two entities in odd ways. Prior to this Hollywood expose, Biohazard had produced a 19-minute CG short called 4D Executor that premiered at the Space World theme park in Japan. Resident Evil and its sequels Apocalypse and Extinction were written and produced by Paul W. Anderson, who prior to the first had directed the horror show Event Horizon, sci-fi bomb Soldier, and fighting adaptation Mortal Kombat. The cinema birthed the character of Alice, portrayed 3 times by Mia Jovovich. The heroine was a product of Umbrella and scientist William Birkin, who later became Dr. Sam Isaacs after actor Jason Isaacs did not return for Part 2 and 3, and was replaced by actor Ian Glenn. The plots from each film are largely irrelevant, except for some notable cameos. The Red Queen, an AI mastermind running Umbrella security defenses, was modeled after a made-up heir to the Ashford line named Angela. Survivors Jill Valentine, Claire Redfield, and Carlos Oliveira joined Alice's fight against Umbrella, and Nemesis appeared in the second film as a stark reminder of the game series these movies were based on. Albert Wesker entered the picture in the third, vaguely tying in his exploits with these unseen divisions of Umbrella. The movies made millions of dollars, but most fans rejected them as mere entertainment. That was until Umbrella Chronicles was released for the Wii in 2007. The final campaign in Russia took Chris Redfield and Jill Valentine through security measures that mirrored a similar acrobatic laser sequence from the first film. Upon regaining consciousness in the Spencer Mansion, Wesker tried to access the Umbrella mainframe only to be locked out by security AI called the Red Queen. What truth lies between the blurry border of these 3 movies and the 6 core Resident Evil games is a mystery not even Wesker knows the answer to, and assorted rumors have been hinting at the possibility of Anderson's 4th. The only Resident Evil motion picture that was entirely attributed to canon was released at the end of 2008. Degeneration, which had a brief run in theaters but primarily saw viewing on DVD and Blu-ray, reunited Leon Kennedy and Claire Redfield after the events of Resident Evil 4. The animated feature exposed the virus in a fictional airport called Harvardville, at the hands of a terrorist named Curtis Miller. His sister Angela and her fellow Special Response Team members helped Leon and Claire sterilize both a T and G virus threat. Degeneration's most alarming addition to the overall storyline was the suggestion that another pharmaceutical entity called Will Pharma had created a vaccine for the T-virus. Predictably, the events of the film saw the only known samples destroyed, rendering the entire thing practically pointless. The beginning of the 21st century generated a string of uncomfortable growing pains for the Resident Evil franchise. Some played Resident Evil 4 and couldn't dream of going back to concrete cameras, while others lamented the loss of traditional zombies and obscured scares. Certain fans boycotted the films as make-believe tripe, while supporters felt they helped Resident Evil gain the notoriety it enjoys today. As the years passed, it became harder and harder to identify exactly what the series stood for. This made it all the more enticing to dissect its increasingly mysterious past. In the final episode of our Resident Evil retrospective, the conspiracy becomes clear. Umbrella left a paper trail a mile long, and as Chris Redfield's campaign moves to a new country, we'll separate fact from fiction.